I came across that video a couple of weeks ago, and I was struck by what I thought it was its timeliness. So here we are back in person, indoors, for the first time in a long time. But even now, there's still uncertainty. We're excited and hopeful, but tentative and apprehensive. What might the fourth wave mean? What about the Delta variant and other variants that are possibly yet to come? What about children and vaccinations? School attendance started this week with all of its uncertainty. Will we need a booster to keep the efficacy of our vaccinations? Well, who should be allowed to do what? Is it okay if we create a two-tiered society of the vaccinated and the unvaccinated? When or will this ever end? We're still caught in the in-between time, the resolved and the unresolved. Like with so many things, it's never black and white. It's never all bad or all good. Never completely finished or dispensed with. It seems that despite our desire for surety and absolute truth, that most, if not all, of life is lived somewhere on a continuum. We are in a constant discernment and decision mode. Just this week I said to a friend about a decision that I need to make, I want God to strike me with a lightning bolt rather than having to discern, to weigh everything, and finally make a decision that is my best effort but possibly not the best decision. Ah, yes, the inconvenience of a God who gives us a say in our own faith and the way we live our lives. So COVID provided our world with a mandated break. As the video stated, nature was re-energized and rejuvenated. Pollution was lessened, birds and fish appeared and reappeared in places they hadn't been seen in years. The slowing down was good for nature, and in some ways good for us as well. We maybe found some time to breathe, some time to refocus on the important rather than just running after the urgent. The slowing down provided a respite from the frenetic pace our lives too often run at. The flip side to this enforced slowing down was to accentuate loss. Many families are mourning the loss of loved ones, loss of connection, loss of activities, and loss of celebrations. And the other reality is that slowing down also removes distractions, things we intentionally put in place to keep our fears and losses at bay. All of a sudden, or even maybe very gradually, stuff crops back up, hurts and losses pop back to the surface. We miss out on dreams, relationships, and experiences, and in the slowing down, we're forced to confront the things that we were frantically trying to outpace. When we stop running, we find peace and pain, heartache and hope. We're forced to confront the two sides of reality of what it means to love and be loved, to be alone and to be lonely, to need and to be needed, and yes, to be needy. Slowing down brings good and bad, and yes, we're back to both and rather than either or. And when it comes to this duality of peace and pain, of heartache and hope, we can add faith and church into that same equation. Some of us have welcomed the respite or break from the rat race that has too often also included church and faith. Others are lamenting the large hole that this loss of community has left in their lives. And now we find ourselves in a beginning to a return to normality. We think, maybe, possibly. We must decide what this will now mean for us. What are we to do as our lives continue to be in flux? As people are at different places, as opposite opinions fly past each other, we're in a time where there seems to be little consensus and little unity on our way forward. To use a biblical reference from Judges 21:25, everyone is doing what is right in their own eyes. In this context of instability, and we default then to individualism, to our own experience and understanding as the ultimate arbiter. Is this the best way to go, especially in matters of faith and church? How do we chart a path both individually and corporately as we face a rapidly evolving future? In the book of Hebrews, the source of tonight's scripture reading that Harvey read for us, we have little background as to the author or the addressees of this letter. So what we can discern all comes from internal evidence. We glean our only understanding of the recipients and their situation from clues within the text. And it is thought by commentators that this letter was written to believers who had been followers of Christ for some length of time. And what also seems evidence from the text is that they are either experiencing or are in fear of persecution. They appear to be possibly weakening in their faith due to new or anticipated further persecution. The recipients may be starting to lose hope and to lose faith. Let me give you a few examples of this theme or call to faithfulness in the book of Hebrews. I'm going to go over a series of verses that pepper the entire book of Hebrews with this emphasis, starting at 2 verse 1. Therefore, we must pay greater attention to what we have heard so that we do not drift away from it. 3 verses 12 to 14. Take care, brothers and sisters, that none of you may have an evil, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God, but exhort one another every day as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partners of Christ, if only we hold our first confidence firm to the end. 4 verse 1. Therefore, while the promise of entering his rest is still open, let us take care that none of you should seem to have failed to reach it. 10:35 to 39. Do not therefore abandon that confidence of yours. It brings a great reward. For you need endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. For yet in a very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not delay, but my righteous one will live by faith. My soul takes no pleasure in anyone who shrinks back. But we are not among those who shrink back and so are lost, but among those who have faith and so are saved. And lastly, 12:12 to 13. Therefore lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. And I listed all of those verses to show you the pervasiveness of this theme of faithfulness in Hebrews. This is a letter that calls for perseverance in faith. I guess if you're uncharitable, you would call it a kick in the pants. And if you're charitable, you call it an encouragement. But it's not just a try-harder call to faithfulness and perseverance. It's based on a deeper underlying foundation of their faith. And that deeper underlying foundation of their faith is revealed in 4 verses 14 to 16. Here the author writes, Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who is in every respect has been tested as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. Faith and community at their core are based on the person and the work of Jesus Christ. And let's not forget that at the core, Jesus is incarnational. Our faith is not a philosophy. It's not a set of intellectually arrived at values and beliefs. It is centered in the person of Jesus Christ. And I think when we get off that, when we lose that, it's very easy for us then to get caught up in religion, very easy for us to get caught up in rules, very easy for us to get caught up in a culture that is about the things that we do, the way that we live, rather than focusing on the person of Jesus Christ. And then we have this call to perseverance, to faithfulness. Perseverance is by its very nature difficult. If it weren't difficult, you wouldn't have to persevere to have perseverance. And I know my English teachers always told me never define a word with itself. But the very nature of perseverance means that it's something difficult, it's something hard. To persevere is difficult. And perseverance is centered in resiliency and the ability to have hope and foresee a better or possibly better future. Resiliency comes from having people support and encourage you. I remember talking to somebody who was speaking about resiliency, and I said to them, how do some people seem who come from such difficult circumstances, which you would say, how do they persevere? How do they continue with that resilience when they have such challenges before them? And they said somebody at some point built into their life. It may have been a small thing, one that we might not consider very important, but it is community, it is relationship, it is the love of somebody who says, I believe in you, I think you can do it, you're worthwhile, you have something of value that creates a resiliency for somebody to be able to persevere in very difficult situations. So community that truly loves us helps us create resiliency. And then to have perseverance, one has to have a clear sense of purpose or highly value that which you are sticking with in the face of difficult or mounting odds. We don't have perseverance for things that we don't really care about. We don't have perseverance for things that we don't really believe in. You actually have to have something that you feel very strongly about in order to persevere, especially as things continue to get more and more challenging. It's actually amazing what we can live through if we truly believe in what we are doing. There are numerous stories of people persevering through staggering odds to survive, to accomplish amazing feats, and to preserve what they believe in. In Hebrews 10:19-25 that Harvey read for us, we find the practical application of this call in the book of Hebrews to persevere because of the person and work of Jesus Christ. The author gets down to the nitty-gritty of what it means to live with faithfulness. But before we get into that, let me digress for a moment. In verse 25 we read, "Not neglecting to meet together as is the habit of some." This verse leads me to my next point. And I'm just going to put my cards on the table. I don't think that the intent of church is to worship online. I believe very strongly that a faith community comes together and worships and supports each other and grows together as we spend time in person with each other and rub shoulders, helping to smooth each other's rough edges, accommodating, appreciating, and learning to live with the diversity that is gifted to us and challenging for us. We are meant to live in community for our own and for the good of others. And I understand that our recent pandemic forced us into scramble mode, and that because of technology, we were privileged to have the opportunity to still worship together in a forum that afforded us a safe and legal way to do so. What a boon that was. What an appropriate response that was to the reality of a worldwide pandemic. We were safer and others were safer. We were able to abide by the government's restrictions because we had that online platform. We were also blessed to have people who understood the technology and who facilitated our ability to still worship together online. We did the best with what we had in the circumstances that we found ourselves in, but this is not the essence of church. This was always meant to be a temporary measure. This was only an interim solution necessitated by unprecedented challenges. We are still streaming online for those who have health issues, those who are still uncomfortable with the level of risk associated with in-person gatherings, for those who might have social anxiety challenges that preclude their being in group situations. And again, it's wonderful that we can again be resourced to be able to do this, but this is not the norm or the preferred future. Church is about you and I, us, learning to worship and live together in person. As I said, Jesus, who we follow, is incarnational. And thus the church, the faith community, is also incarnational. Now back to our text from Hebrews chapter 10. I'm going to read you verses 23-25 to remind you of the scripture. "Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who has promised is faithful. And let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." So if we begin with verse 23, it's a call to perseverance in faith. Hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering. This is our own preservation of faith and the belief we have in Jesus. And why? Because he who promised is faithful. Verse 24 is a call to perseverance in helping each other live out our faith. We are to provoke one another to love and good deeds. This is about us helping each other live out our faith together. It's really hard to provoke somebody on Zoom. I guess you can, but usually it's not in a positive manner. Usually it's provoking them by doing something dumb, like, "Your mic's not on." It's not on. You're not on. We are to provoke one another to love and good deeds. And verse 25 is a call to perseverance in living in community together, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some. The latter two calls are the relational component of faith where we support, encourage, and exhort one another to living as followers of Christ. We are called to personal and communal perseverance. We're called to persevere in our faith, and we're called to persevere in our relational community of faith. And we can do this to some extent online, but not nearly as well as if we are in person. Bottom line, if you aren't here, you lose and we lose. Each person contributes to the greater whole. And I don't say this for guilt or try to ensure 100% attendance. In fact, I don't want you to be here 100% of the time. You do need a break once in a while from these wonderful people. But you need to be here because we need you to be here. Because when you're not here, we lose. We miss out when you're not here. You matter. You are missed when you aren't here. We need your smile, your words, your singing, your volunteering, your encouragement. And that is done through your presence and your participation. And like I said, I don't mean this for guilt, but I really want you to understand that church is about us. It's about the people of God. It's not about sermons. It's not about singing. It's not about all of these other things or accoutrements that come together with church. Church is about people. And I think we found that out during the pandemic. I don't think anybody said, I really miss Roger's preaching. That's the most amazing part. There's such a hole in my life because Roger's not preaching anymore. But people realize they missed people. I can't tell you the number of times I've heard people say since we've been able to see each other in social situations or whatever, that people have said, there's just people here. It's just great to see people. Church is community. It's people. And you need to be here. Not because of some sort of enforced rule or regulation or whatever. Not at all. That's not who I am. But you matter to us. You are us. We'll have to do that, the Toys R Us. We'll have to do FaithWorks R Us or something, some stupid. We'll have to change the logo again. We just got a new one. I digress. The author of Hebrews is saying to his readers, and by extension to us, now is not the time to give up or to lose hope. Now is the time to double down, to renew your personal and relational resolve. Now is the time to acknowledge the loss and the pain. The world did slow down, and we gained and we lost some things. And in the slowing down, it was easy to lose hope, to feel the devastation of what is gone and what won't ever return. But now is not the time to quit. It's not the time to give up. Rather, we acknowledge the reality of how difficult it has been. We acknowledge the future is still less than clear, that there may be some significant hurdles coming that we can't even see at the moment. But we are more convinced that the person and the work that God has accomplished through the person of Jesus Christ is the answer, even in these uncertain times. And we are more convinced that the best way to move into this uncertain future is together as the faith community that provokes one another to love and good deeds, that doesn't neglect to meet together, and that encourages one another. Faith and community are the only answers that truly work in this ever-changing and ever-challenging world. I'll be honest. I'm not really all that good at persevering. Theoretically, I want to run a marathon, even a triathlon. But I don't really want to put in the work required because, you know what? It's too hard. And if I did a triathlon, I'd drown because I'm a very poor swimmer. So that's also a little bit of a negative. And I'd like to lose some weight. But it's really, really hard. And if I'm honest, my extended family drives me a little crazy, and most of the times I just like to check out because it's hard. And even faith in church can at times, even for a pastor, be really hard and discouraging, and I want to just give up. I need this Hebrews call. What did I call it earlier? A kick in the pants or encouragement? I think every one of us needs our kick of encouragement. I think every one of us needs to understand what God's calling to us in faithfulness. Because it's hard to be faithful. It's much easier to check out. It's much easier to say, well, that's too hard. Or, I can't really put in the effort. Persevering, like I said, in its very nature, is difficult. Let's grant that. It's not easy to live in faith, especially when we have doubts, especially when there's all kinds of things that challenge us within our world. It's not easy to live in church when there's all kinds of people that we wouldn't normally associate with. There's all kinds of things that make it difficult. Let's grant that. But I think sometimes I get confused that God's call of faith is a call to be successful, however that is defined. I need a repeated reminder that the call is instead to be faithful. The call is not to be successful, whatever that means. The call of God for us as followers of Jesus Christ is to be faithful. I think that, again, the verse that comes to mind is that I want to hear when I see Jesus is, well done, my good and faithful servant. It's not successful servant. He's not going to say, okay, how many people came? How many people came to Christ? How many people did you baptize? How many churches? What did you do with all of that? It's the parable of the talents all over again, if you know it. It's not how much you have. It's what you do with what you have. It's the faithfulness of what you have. Again, I get caught up and I'm digressing, and we've got to get going because there's pods after. Faithfulness is all about perseverance. Perseverance is all about resiliency, and resiliency is all about community. We're in this together, and we will move into the future, the uncertainty of the future together. And faithfulness is best accomplished if we do it together, us and Jesus Christ. Amen. It's time for Pod's dismissal. Mel has already talked a little bit about it. I'm to give you some instructions as you go. Kindergarten to grade 5 goes to CO9, which I think is down the hallway. CO9, you'll be watching a VeggieTales video. That's the reward or the dessert for having to listen to me. You get to go now and see a VeggieTales video. And leaders are to go to D33, which is up the stairs. So I release you, those that are going for the video and those that are going for leaders' time. Robin's going to lead us in worship again.